Welcome to The Next Chapter, a show about how to move your life forward and what comes next. I'm your host, Carey Pena. Hi, everyone. I'm Carey Pena, and this is The Next Chapter podcast. With me in studio, Cliff Danley from Grace Sober Living. Cliff, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Carey. Thanks for having me.
I met Cliff at an event where I was the MC for the Steele Family Foundation, and I was really taken with your story. It's funny because you just said to me, I didn't feel I was that polished on stage. I said, but you had heart. You got up on stage and you told the story of your life unraveling and why it is important for you today to use that story to help others. So let's start with when things came apart for you.
Yeah, so I can point to a day, and actually I know the day. It was March 25th, 2005, and I could call that my definitely moment of clarity, sobriety day. We can call it a lot of things. And I would say that was an explosion, but what it really was as well was an accumulation of choices that in many ways, it was like the perfect storm. It came to a head, and so it just exploded. So I found myself arrested, brokenhearted, and I was already kind of homeless anyway. But it was just a real quick, it's like somebody falling off a building and hitting a few canopies and everything all the way down. You just boom, 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 boom. And I found myself right there. It was like on the streets or being released. And yeah, so it was quite a day.
For context, can you talk about your career? You had a big career going on.
I've had, opportunities and squandered them, but I had 19 years in aerospace machining with groups like Allied Signal was an organization I worked with, corporation. I had 3 years with the United States Post Office. I had just gone career, one of the last things I ever had done in terms of career before the wheels came off, so to speak. I don't know how to date myself here, but also, very capable in the trades and in construction. And even now you can, still make good money there. But yeah, so, a career and a way to make it through life was never anything that I struggled with. So There was always something there. So
forgive, my bluntness here, but how did you get hooked on meth?
Yeah. So, and again, this is like years worth of work we call in recovery. We call it doing the work and looking back and reflecting. And the only thing I can say is, there wasn't a lot of guidance in my younger days. I had an older brother who sadly is still out there. And I got reflecting on that. So like, why me and why not him? But a latchkey kid, mom and dad, middle class, good providers. But I learned over the years about myself that one of the things that I needed to know, and I think every person needs to know, is do they have value? Are they loved or lovable? And I think that what I needed in life is a lot of verbal affirmation. So consequently, you go out searching for things to satisfy you that the world's probably not probably, I'm going to stop. There's minimizing language. The world is not going to be delivering on that. And so you just go out and look for experience and you experiment and you're just doing life and chasing the next thing. I didn't even know I was doing that at the time. So yeah, I was introduced to drugs and using drugs from 7th grade on.
Wow.
Smoking pot, doing speed, experimenting with hallucinogenics. And I'm so grateful that I didn't, I wasn't exposed to the things that are out there now because they're so much more deadly. But one thing led to another. And then there was a season where I did stop. I had a marriage that lasted 13 years, but I did, marry a party buddy. She got pregnant and she came to let me know that she's had 2 abortions. She is not having a third. And I'm like, wow, I guess I'm going to be a father, whether I like it or not. So I made what many would have considered the right decision for the wrong reasons. And that ultimately didn't work out. I always just felt a little lost and a little trapped and a little, so and I just had this from time to time just to go out and just kind of let loose and just party and do drugs. And then a divorce happened in 2000. And then it literally, the joke I sometimes reference or whatever is like, I was like a Jack Russell Terrier and somebody left the gate open. Mm-hmm. And I just bolted and I just ran away from everything because I just felt trapped and I didn't know what was going on inside of me. And in 5 pretty fast years, of going out and finding a lot of the things I thought were going to satisfy me. It turned out that wasn't what was going to satisfy me. So it ended up leading to a lot of destruction and heartache.
How did you begin building your life back?
Well, so again, I have this phrase I like to say, my best day, worst day. So the worst day of my life was March 25th, 2005. And it was also, I didn't know it at the time, it was my best day. And so I found myself again arrested and home. I got arrested on Good Friday. And I was in jail for 2.5 days. And the funny thing was, it was dusk of Easter Sunday. And I remember walking out and having these big steel doors. That's in Mesa, on Javelina, right there on Mesa Drive. And I was just blown away. I was like, I went to jail for Easter, but I knew I'd had a faith. And literally when these giant steel doors, and they just let me, like, you're finally released, saw the judge and whatever, court dates. I remember those doors sliding open, and I literally felt like I was walking out of a tomb. Like, wow, this is so profound. But I didn't know where I was going, so I had to, unfortunately, call my drug dealer and say, hey, here I am. And he came and got me. And then it began a process of, what's next? What am I going to do now? But I did know things were going to be completely different, and that had begun.
And so that was the beginning of your sobriety journey?
Absolutely. And everything changed that day. It really did. I walked out. Like I say, I called my friend, and he said, yeah, I'll come get you. So he brought me home. And there was, it was just chaos there as well. So, but I said, well, I know that I'm not going to continue with this anymore. And I actually tried, and the dope wouldn't work. It just didn't get me high. Like, what is this? No matter how much of this I do, I'm not feeling anything. I was like, that was odd. But, and he was actually a really good guy. He,
the drug dealer?
Get off on a tangent, but he had a lot of kindness. He showed more kindness to me than many church people did. But I just said, hey, there's a place, maybe you can take me in Phoenix. It's called Streets of Joy. And that didn't work out. But long and short of it, I did end up at a place called the Phoenix Rescue Mission.
And then you started really getting healthy. And I appreciate that you dropped off some of the poetry that you were writing during this time and really crying out for help in this. You know, you say pain is still what wakes me up and pain puts me to sleep, but I am closer to his love. It's felt beneath my weeps.
Yeah.
That's just the beginning of one of your poems.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is when he brought me back to his place, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't make calls. There was a restraining order. It was just really horrible. It was also very cliche. It's just, whatever it is. So it's a broken heart, but everybody has their own threshold for trauma. But I do remember, and his house was across the street from a little park, and this had never happened. And I said, hey, do you have a tablet? Because I didn't know what to do. I wasn't allowed to talk. I couldn't share my side of the story. I couldn't explain to anybody what had happened. And it's just a drug user, a tweaker, whatever, So that was something that would be easily dismissed. But I do remember said it was one of the yellow legal pads. And I remember he said, here. And I grabbed a pen and I just walked across the street. And I just started writing. And eventually I started writing a lot. And I'm like, where's this coming from? Because it was like, wow. So I never really even recognized that I had a gift or a skill or a talent or anything. And I remember thinking, this isn't even me, So I'm writing this out. So immediately, right in the depth of the trauma, there was this outlet. And it was everything. I couldn't even catch my breath in a lot of ways. Again, I look back on it. How did I survive it? But yet, he was there.
So when you started writing, essentially for people who are walking through trauma, a lot of times therapists recommend, in your case, it was poetry, that it was showing up as poetry. But a lot of trauma therapists recommend writing something down, journaling. I can see that was very significant for you.
So it was the only outlet I had because I felt like I was, again, censored or shut down. There was another poem called Restrain the Order. It was about being told, there's a gag order on you. You can't talk. You're not allowed to tell your story. You can't reach out. And the others you want to reach out to, they're just going to say, dismiss it. So it was my personal way of venting and that type of thing. So absolutely. I look back on it, I'm like, wow. And if you know the date on that, It's 2005.
Yes.
And I haven't written much since. So the other thing that's kind of sad, I wrote a lot. There's a binder, but I processed the trauma that way, and I really felt his presence. So there was a comfort, something I would never want to do again.
So faith was a big part of your recovery journey.
Yeah, and it was rooted in some pretty profound things and some profound miracles. I mean, it was a crooked path to even just get to the mission, and everything was, it just seemed disjointed and broken. But the beautiful part about the mission, and I tell this to people, it was long-term residential recovery. And the cool part about that is, and you got people out there doing 90-day programs, even Grace Sober Living, the men and women live there, and they do their life, and they go out and they work and they come home. But for me, what I think I needed, which is what we would call the sequestered, like I just needed everything to stop. In fact, I had an amazing opportunity with another career in environmental industry, removing asbestos and mold. And I was going to make back then the best money ever. And I was so kind of tempted to the best way to get even is just be successful. So I still had little issues like getting even. For what? So, but I just remember thinking, I'm going to take and they were the same guy, my dealer. He was the vice president of an environmental company. And he was putting me through EPA classes and this and that. And I owed him a lot of money too. For dope. And I remember one day he was calling to let me know one more class, you're going to start Monday. And I remember having to tell him, I said, his name was Greg. I said, Greg, I can't do it. He goes, what do you mean you can't do it? I said, I appreciate everything you've done for me, but I think I need to go to the mission and get well. And the mission was rough. This is a homeless shelter. Back then, all they had was porta potties outside. And I'll never forget what he said. It was pretty profound. And so if I go there, I know what you offer, but if I go there, I'll get well or whatever. And he goes, you're going to do great. And I go, what do you mean? And I said, I owe you money and everything. He goes, don't worry about that. He says, what you need to do is go be a living amends. And I know you're going to do great because I already hear you using the word I get to instead of I have to.
Oh, wow.
I didn't even know I was speaking on that level. And I'll never, ever forget his kindness for that. To this day, he said, don't you worry about that. Just go be a living amends. Because he knew I was not able to go apologize to some key people that I'd hurt. Mm-hmm. And so he said, just be a living amends.
So do you feel that has been your next chapter?
Yeah, so everything, including why I'm sitting in this chair, everything I can pinpoint back to a decision that I made in that moment. There was a crossroads there. And it would have been really easy and tempting to go, just get back on your feet and get going. But I also knew I was so broken that the thought, I was just hanging on by a thread. I could barely catch a breath. It's like, I can't do it. I was just so tired. And to think that I could go somewhere for a year and a half at the rescue mission and just get well, and all my needs are taken care of. And the only thing they're asking me is to just do well for yourself, follow the rules, go to the classes, journal, write. And I was like, who gets to do that? And so I reframed that whole thing. It's like, is it a homeless shelter? Is it a long-term residential free, rough around the edges drug and alcohol recovery program? Yes. But I also look at it too. There's executives that work for Intel or Boeing that get to go off on these extended sabbaticals to get well. So I just reframed it as it was my long-term retreat. Like, where else do you get to go where they take care of you? The food was amazing. I went from 160 pounds and I ballooned out to 240. So I had to find a recovery program to recover from my recovery program after I graduated. So
talk about the mental health aspects of this as you're getting sober and, like you said, dealing with your own brokenness mentally. How did you start to repair?
Well, again, so I was committed. I was at one point in that whole journey before I got there. So I was medicated. There was all kinds of antidepressants and all kinds of psych meds. And it was literally just, obviously I had my faith. I had the scriptures. And it was just like you would see in some of the writings, that was literally one day at a time. And there were little glimpses of things that indicated, it's going to be different. I don't, fully know what it's going to look like, but I knew that I made a decision and everything was going to change. So the thing that I would say to anybody struggling with that is just trust the process of the time, because everybody gets nervous about time. I'm not getting any younger. This isn't happening fast enough. I'm missing out on something. And just the idea of surrendering all that. So I was in no hurry to get back out. And I did. I just took it a day at a time, a prayer at a time.
I think that that's really important what you're saying right now, because when people are going through something hard, it doesn't have to be drugs, alcohol, it could be depression, you may be going through divorce, whatever the situation may be. And I think that there is a sense of, how long is this going to last? When am I going to be done with this? And that's really a pressure cooker to be in, because you do have to take it one day at a time.
In fact, I wrote that in one of the Psalms. I said, how long will this pain, something along the lines of, when will this end, this deliver me from me? And I just remember that thinking, I remember asking God, I said, Lord, I know suicide's not an option. However, there's nothing this world really offers me anymore, because I've gone out and I've tried and tasted and done a lot of things. And I said, there's nothing here. So if you could just take me home, that'd be great. And I literally heard a voice. There was a few times where I had the thought so loud that it was like a clarion voice. And I heard him say, no. He said, no, I finally got a man I can use. I'm like looking over, I'm like, what? Where's that coming from? And I said, so then all this pain? He goes, yeah, that's going to stay a while longer too, because you're going to need that to keep you humble.
Mm. And all these years later, how do you carry that with you? Sort of that mission?
Well, here's the deal. There is always some sort of residual. I think of the Apostle Paul. He had this affliction. You can read about it, and he asked God to take it away. And God said, no, I'm not. And he says, my grace is sufficient. So there are still things that plague me to this day. And what I have to do is reflect on the goodness and the faithfulness to navigate that. So like there's still thoughts of shame or embarrassment, and it's a big deal. Shame's a big deal. And I know you probably know that from conversations you've had, but to just, push back against that with the truth that you have. And one of the reasons why I was pleased about maybe having this opportunity today, and one of the things I tell people, one of the greatest things that we can leverage in our life is leveraging and remembering and implementing what we already know. So it's about just, these are the things but you don't want to forget them, because sometimes you'll just find yourself like you took a wrong turn. What am I doing here? Mm-hmm. I'm experiencing this trauma again. And so one of the things I did do, and this is not long ago, I've only been with Grace, I'm coming up on May 25th, ironically, my 1 year with them. But prior to that, I was in in-between time with my career. And I'm like, okay, Lord, what are we doing here? Because I'm out delivering packages, and I'm like, this isn't really the best use of what I think my skill set is, but I also just wanted to go deliver packages for a while. I just didn't want anything. But I remember being in this dark place again, and I thought, wait a minute, you know what I did? Is I said, you need to remember how often. So I just pulled out a journal and I wrote down everything, clear back as far as I can remember, where there was an obvious divine intervention for a good outcome. And I just created this long list of gratitude. You were here. You were here. You showed up here when I thought it was going to look like this. So that's how I do it. And then the final thing I'll just say is, I can't afford to go back to that trauma to have those incredible experiences with God. But what I do get to live through is watching other people experience that and help guide them along. So I get to not quite have to feel the pain, but I get to experience some of the satisfaction that somebody's experiencing deliverance or breakthrough or whatever it is, and if I'm playing a part in that in any way, shape, or form, that excites me.
So you are working with Grace Sober Living,
right.
And this is founded by Jimmy Walker and his wife, wonderful wife. Jimmy Walker is the founder of Celebrity Fight Night, so he has a lot of high-profile friends. He wanted to open this, he and his wife Nancy, in honor of their son who they lost to addiction. Now, the difference here is they're trying to make it really holistic, right? Mm-hmm. Grace Sober Living is about, like you said, bringing people in and giving them a holistic opportunity to heal.
Absolutely. And even that's changed over the years. There's things now that people would employ. That's why I like the Crossroads ladies. They talked about, like vibrations and stuff and that type of thing. And there's so much that maybe even evangelical circles would think was just a little bit of nonsense, hocus pocus, but I don't see it the same way. And I'm a very biblically grounded guy, but there is body, mind, and soul. Even at the mission, they didn't want us out in the back exercising. And I'm going, are you kidding? I learned later that one of the best ways to get well and move toxins out of your body is burning through the fat. And we don't want a prison mindset around here. And I just thought, that's kind of sad. You're because of fear, you want to allow something good to happen. And I think that's losing a battle before it even starts. So why not just let something occur that's positive and then manage anything that gets a little off, but give people a chance to exercise or whatever. So anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent, but I guess I say all that to say there's a lot of ways in which holistic, I'm big on that. There's, whether it is writing or whatever it is. So
do you think this model, because Grace Over Living now has 7 homes and with hopes to expand, what do you think is unique about what they're doing?
Well, and again, if I have anything to do with it, because I'm going to be teaching life skills, I'm going to be teaching, spiritual renewal classes. I'm going to be bringing in, a component for community service, which is going to get people, connected. And many of them are already doing that. So I guess to get to just channel it and make it informal and say, you're going to get some credit for this and it's also going to put you on a pathway to achieve something. But there's so many ways to get well. I mean, again, what I heard from the testimonies are amazing. I'm here with a testimony, but some of the things that are shared at Grace Sober Living on their Never Give Up meetings could be screenplays for films and whatnot. I mean, it's that profound. And, but reinvesting in something, discovering something, I never knew. That was a therapy for me, but it was also like, well, wait a minute, I am a communicator. So I love communicating ideas and concepts, especially as it relates to wellness. Anything, nutrition, all those things. The ironic thing about, especially in a men's program, we're out there running and gunning and doing stupid things to our body. We're trashing ourselves. But a lot of the guys I've noticed, and men anyway, when they get well, it's like, oh yeah, now it's like, I do want to be in the weight pit. I do want to eat better. I do want to. So it's funny, the polarity to go from one end to the other. So I just turned 60. So I'm always on this quest to make sure I can still get the best out of life that I can. And I've seen a lot of people do it. I tell people that you get a lot out of life. I admire that about you.
What is your life like today?
Well, I mean, so I do have a birth certificate that I have an argument with from time to time, but I do thrive on. So I like just to keep well. I mean, for fun things, I hang out with a bunch of sober writers through Celebrate Recovery, and they're called Broken Chains. And these are bikers, like hardcore bikers. Now, I don't have a drop of ink and I don't have a piercing, but I ride with those guys. But I do like to hit the gym. I'm in a racquetball league. I thrive on anything that's energy driven. That's why I liked meth. I don't like feeling tired, lazy, unmotivated. I like that adrenaline, that intensity. So, and I find it in working out, of course, we know there's endorphins that are released in that. Mm-hmm. And so there's your runner's high, so to speak. So, and that's just a way to self-measure and say, yeah, you still got it a little bit. It still feels good.
What is the question people ask you the most? I mean, you're working with people who are in it. They're in it right now. They're deep. They don't know if they can make it to the end of the tunnel. And I'm sure people seek your advice.
Yeah, I don't know that I get the question so much, but I guess the thing is, and I alluded to it earlier, this is the long process and where you get to enjoy the process and not be worried about too much on what's ahead. And when I worked at the mission, I was not the master's degree counselors, and there was a whole wing of the program there that had them. Guys would often come out of that at meeting with their counselor, their one-on-one, and they'd come down and find my office and say, Cliff, hey, man, I know I can ask you this because you've been there. I always say, I've got all the t-shirts, right? And so, but to answer your question more succinctly too, there was an individual, a friend of the ministry, actually a family member, it was Jennifer Walker's husband named Ethan, and he came in and he was the guest speaker one night. And he was one of these hard drivers, type A achiever. And he said, one of the things I've learned, I've always looking for the hustle, the angle, the get it quick and the shortcut. And he did a whole message and he simply entitled it, Take the Long Cut. Mm. So be okay with the surrender, the stillness of it all. Like, it's okay. We've been out pushing so hard at things that, and it's antithetical, but it's also a paradox. But the greatest success you can have is rooted in surrender and humility. And he picks up your cause, and you're going to see and experience things that you never thought were achievable. And again, it's antithetical. It's opposite of what the world might say. Here, be ambitious, and I get that. But surrender and humility really produce, and again, I just feel, anyway, that's an answer to the question.
I love that. And just as we wrap things up, I was just curious to know, since you had such deep trauma related to addiction and all of the things that caused your life to unravel, does it ever feel tiring to be around, the stories of people walking through addiction and sort of the quote unquote brokenness? Do you ever just feel like, just need a day away from this?
I did for a while when I was at the Phoenix Rescue Mission. I did 8 years of street outreach. That's right there where chronic homeless, where you see people that have been capable of sleeping on concrete for years. And one of the things I've learned, and even still knowing that there's dark night of the soul experiences that I can still have, is that, and what we say in this trauma-informed care is not, hey, what's wrong with you, but what happened to you? Mm-hmm. And so when I hear about the trauma, it's like, well, that's why I have trauma. So I have a sensitivity to that. And that's probably why I'm going to have a little remaining as well, because that's that authenticity. But, so it's a little different now. So there was a change, and, I guess we could call it burnout. But I don't think I could experience that too much, because I guess I just see what all the potential is and where this is all going for people who, again, and it's a mystery. Why am I in this chair and my brother's still out there? Why do I reflect on all the people, the amazing miracles of people that have gone on to do amazing things, and the amazing memories of people who died? So, and it's just not for me to overanalyze. I think sometimes that's where it gets kind of weird, and you can get ahead of yourself. So back to surrender. I don't have to have these answers. Just go do the next right thing, which is why it's similar to this.
Yes.
Here, right? And be available to somebody else. That's your best therapy. Because if you ever wonder, like, wow, am I still worth it? Or is there still a plan? Is it still going to work out? If I'm in some way helping somebody else, and like we say in the business, God always pays his bills, so he'll take care of me. So,
Cliff, thank you so much
Absolutely.
for sharing your story. And thanks for the work that you're doing with Grace Sober Living, Steele Family Foundation, incredible work helping change and save thousands of lives.
Yeah, and it's an I get to.
I appreciate you. Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much.
Carey.
And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. I'm Carey Pena, and this is The Next Chapter.